Okay, welcome back, folks. Let's get started on this game. My inspo for this game was a really short, brief clip that I saw on one of the code.org videos. It was in animating sprites at the end of the video, and they popped up four different game examples here, and it was this one down here with the little paddle moving back and forth. That's just bouncing a falling uh, ball or object. And I saw that and I was like, I can do that. That might be a good start for a game. So let's do that. So as always, we're going to go to our projects tab and start a new project in GameLab. I'm going to rename this, and I call this Rubber Chickens. There aren't actually rubber chickens in the game yet, but I was hoping to go get there eventually. I'm going to be working in text today. So, in this episode, I'm going to create my player sprite. I'm going to create the ball sprite, and I'm going to code the player controls, that back and forth motion of the player, of the paddle. I think I'll also add gravity to the ball so we can see it fall and collide. I think. Maybe that'll be the next one. Okay, let's get started. Okay, first the sprites. I'm going to just draw my player sprite, and I believe that I made that 100 by 20. Or 20 by 100, rather. And I want the dimensions exact, so I'm going to resize this to make sure neither of these are selected. Width of 100, height of 20, resize. And then I can just bucket fill this with some color. We'll just go with red for now. And I want to rename this player and go back to the code. Okay. I'm going to put it at 350, 200, 350. So it's near the bottom of the screen. Give that a run, see how that looks. Oops, gotta draw sprites. Yep, that's about right. I'm gonna put a white background in just for now, which I will change later. And now it's time for player controls. And we're only doing left and right controls this time. And like you guys saw last week, we can organize code inside of a function and then just call the function. And that's what we want to do in this case with the player controls. Actually, we're going to do that with pretty much the whole game. The draw loop is going to be very short. It's just going to include a bunch of function calls to update the player, update the ball, and so on. So I'm going to write this separately down below the draw loop, and I'm calling it update player. And then inside the draw loop, I want to call this function like so. So let's start with if key down left, we want to move the player in the negative x direction. Let's say 5. And I can just copy this conditional then. And if key down right, player.x equals player.x plus 5. Let's give that a run and see if it works. Sure does. It's a little slow. Probably going to increase that a little bit. And I actually think that maybe I would rather use my left hand to control the paddle. So I'm going to change left and right to A and D. Okay, let's change 5 to 10 and see if it's a little more responsive then. Yes, much better. Okay, so that would be fine for the player controls. Totally works. I'm gonna actually do something a little fancier because I would like a little more realistic motion. When I push A and D, I want the paddle to speed up to a maximum speed, and when I release it, I want it to slow down, sort of skid to a stop, the way real things move. And the first thing that I want to do in order to do that is define another variable which is the speed in the x direction, because I'm going to use it a whole bunch and I'm going to want to play around with that number. And so I don't want to have to change it in like 10 places in my program or more. So I'm going to say var speed x equals 10. And I'll change this then to speed x. It didn't make any difference in what we see, but that's going to be quite helpful later. Okay, so let's modify the rightward movement. So I have a counter pattern here with the player's x position. I'm going to actually delete this, and I'm going to put another conditional in here, and I'm going to start speed x at 0. So what's going to happen is I'm going to when you push the right key, I'm going to increase speed x, and then later on down here, I'm going to set the player's velocity or its speed to that speed x position. So all I'm doing in the controls is modifying speed x. So we're going to say that if speed x is less than or equal to 10, so I'm going to set 10 as my maximum speed. So the first thing we're going to do is if we push the D key, and for some reason we're already moving at max speed, it won't increase the speed any more beyond that. So that's the reason we have to have that. If the speed x is less than that, we're going to increase it. And we just do that then with our counter pattern, speed x we're going to say +5, because remember, we set it to 0 up here. So if we're not going the max speed, we're going to increase our speed by 5 each time through the draw loop. We need then down here to set the player's speed equal to the speed x. And we can do that with this command. And we didn't cover velocity, but essentially this is just like a counter pattern. And velocity is, you can think of it as analogous to speed. It's basically the same, although it also has direction. But so we increase, when we press the D key, we increase speed x, and down here we set the player's speed to speed x. Let's see if that works. Sure does. However, the paddle keeps moving, and that's just sort of a byproduct of using velocity x, is that when I lift the key, it doesn't stop. So we also have to code in controls to slow it down back to 0. Let's do that. And that's going to be if I'm not pressing the D key, right? So if I take my finger off the D key, if it's not pressed, then I want the speed to go back down to 0. So I can just put an else statement here. And in this else, we want to check if we don't want to just decrease it forever, right? Because then it'll start moving left. We want to decrease it back to 0. So we need to check to make sure that there is some rightward motion there that we want to decrease back down to 0. So we're going to say if speed x is greater than 0, then decrease it down to 0 with the counter pattern. Let's try that, see if we'll... Yep. If I tap the key, I get a little bit of motion, but it's not... It's getting to a halt then, which is exactly what we want. Okay, so then the same thing with key down A, and I can just copy and paste these commands, this big if else now, inside here. Okay, and for leftward motion, I can just copy this here and replace the counter pattern with it. So if I play, if the A key goes down, if the speed is, and remember that we're moving leftward, so we're going to have negative speeds now. So our max speed is going to be -10. So we need to check if speed x is greater than or equal to -10, then we're going to make it more negative. Otherwise, if speed x is less than 0, meaning we have some leftward motion, we want speed x equal to speed x plus 5 here, and I gotta fix this. I don't know how that happened. I was messing around with this while I paused recording. Let's try this and see if it works. No, we have an error. So that's just with my curly brackets, I think. Let me check this real quick. Yes, this should not be here. This needs a semicolon. I think that fixed it. Good. We now have left and rightward motion. That's a little more realistic. The speed, it's not going to feel that much different because we speed up really fast. If this number was smaller, like 1, you can really feel the acceleration up and down. But we're going to leave that 5 for now because we want a pretty responsive player, pretty responsive paddle, and I think this is working just fine. Okay, that's player controls done. Okay, let's add the ball here, and then add gravity to this. So I'm gonna call this ball 1 because I anticipate having more than 1. And I'm just going to use, here we have sports. I'm just going to use one of these. This little swirly guy. Call him ball 1. And we got to scale that down, obviously. Let's try 0.2. Still too big. That's decent. Still a bit big, maybe 0.05. Yeah, that's good. Now we're going to need an update ball function. Make a function call in the draw loop. I'm going to collapse this so I have some more room here, and define the update ball function here. And I'm going to create a gravity variable up here. Set it equal to 1, and gravity, that's just what we're going to add to the velocity each time through the draw loop for the ball. So we want it to fall downwards, so that's the positive y direction. So I'm going to do ball1.velocity y equals ball1.velocity y plus gravity. This is, again, a counter pattern with the ball's y velocity. And that should make it fall right off the screen. And you can see that it's realistic motion because it's accelerated motion. So it starts falling slow and it increases in speed as it falls, which is how things actually fall. And that's because we used a counter pattern with velocity and not just with position. This is kind of a long statement. And remember that there's a shortcut for this. We can just say ball1.velocity y plus equals gravity, and it's the exact same thing. We get the exact same effect with a much shorter statement. It's a little bit easier to read and manage, so we'll just leave it like that. Okay. I think that's enough for this first video. In the next video, I'm going to add edge sprites. So, well, you know what? Yeah, let's cut it off here. I'm going to add edge sprites, and I'm going to add the bouncing, the collision code, and the edge sprites will keep the ball on the screen. If it hits the side, it'll bounce off, and we'll have the very basic structure then for our rubber chicken game. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.